Hello, in this video I want to show you a new way to test the frontend and why we need a new way to test the frontend. Probably you heard this phrase every day, right? Your PM asks you for a new feature and you need to develop. So imagine that feature is this one, a really simple one, which is a to-do list where we need to add a delete button. So basically what we start doing is we just run our server, we start developing, and then we have our feature done. We have our delete button, we test it manually, and we know that everything is working. But once we ship the PR, we receive some request changes in our PR. Like in this case, don't merge your codes and add some tests. Probably you feel frustration, and that is normal because you already did your feature and you need to add a totally new code just to test what you already done. And then just starting to say these phrases, right? For example, in a standard, probably you heard, we don't have time to add test. Or in a PR, TDD just lost me down. Or in a Slack DM, I tested manually, it works, why do I need to write more code? Or maybe you just say, I do MTAC, maybe test after code. And the most common one right now is you just tell your AI agent to add test. But the problem is not that you don't want to add test. You probably are doing tests. You're doing the manual test and you are validating your code. The problem is not testing, it's the disconnect between building and testing. And why is that? Front-end testing today has two ways to add test, but those two ways have a few problems. So the first one, and one of the common ones, is unit and component test. And also you can include integration test here. Which tests are this one? Probably you might know. B-test, jest, testing library, those kind of tools. Those are great if you want to test fast and test component libraries, like component in isolation. But the problem is that they are not running in a real browser. It's not a proper test. You can test logic, but if you want to do a proper integration test, it becomes really complex. You probably need a lot of mocking and a lot of code just to run a simple test. And also, if you try to do refactors, they're not come along very well with those refactors. What is the other way? End-to-end. The biggest two here are Cypress and Playwright, but also Selenium. This test executes in a real browser with your real network, and you can test full user flows. The problem is that these tests are a little bit slow, and for me the biggest problem is that these tests are way disconnected from your current development work. So when you develop a feature, you are working in your own code base, and then you need to switch to a different browser if you want to execute this test, or execute it in the terminal with headless mode and expect that everything passes without seeing anything. So basically it's separating from your current work and your current test. Also, the time when you add more than 30, 40 tests increases a lot. And if you have to run it in CI, for example, if it fails on Friday, probably you will not solve it until Monday because it takes a lot of time. Then where's the gap? Right now we have the unit that runs on a fake browser, but you have fast feedback. And we also have the end-to-end that are a bit slow, a little bit disconnected from your workflow, but run in a real browser. So what we wanted to do is fill in that gap where you have real browser and no need for extra tooling. You just plug in into your code a way to do test in the same browser you are working. And that's why I wanted to present you TWD, which stands for Testing While Development. Testing while development is not just a tool, it's a way of working. So what it stands for, testing while development, is that testing should be part of development, not the phase after it. So for the people that follow this idea, testing is not an extra step. It's not a new story point for the estimation. It's part of the development. It's the same as a Git commit. So we create tools and we create our developments around testing. And for us, testing is not a dogma, it's not a pyramid. It basically is solving these three questions. Asking ourselves, what are we building right now? In our previous example is the delete button, right? Then ask ourselves, how do you manually check that? For us, it's just clicking the button and checking if the API is called, something like that in the delete example. And then how can I automate that exact validation? Once we have all these questions, we create our test. And we also start covering more than just happy paths. But we base our test on that idea to validate what we will be manually testing. And like we mentioned before, the current tooling for frontend are not the best one for this idea. So that's why we created a new npm package called twd-js. With this package, we will be able to complete that idea of testing while development and making the testing in the front end part of the development. And in the next videos, we will cover how to install and how it is displayed in your app and how simple it is to add test and getting coverage and make your test available for your AI agents and a lot of tools that are around this TWD ecosystem.